Now I want to talk about scaring off people for a quick moment, and that is that one of the things you have to realise when you're doing reform of the welfare system, and this is a hard thing for people to realise, is, well, it's sort of obvious. Not everybody's the same. Not everybody's the same. So if you lined up everybody in a program, you have some people who, if they don't have access to that program, it is the end of the world. You know, they really do need it badly. And then you have at the other end of the distribution, you have some people who are just playing around. Now, how many people there are in each category will vary by program, by program, by person, but there's a complete spectrum of people. So that means that a lot of when you do programs, the best chance you've got of cutting numbers, if you're into the numbers game, is the people who are just playing around, who don't really need it. And that group is much bigger than you will think. And I'm going to finish and show you something which I think is quite remarkable. I want to show you something, and this is going to be the last, I won't be able to talk about all this. I want to show you something which is really interesting. I'll ask you what you think about this. It's not easy to get disability in Australia. Right? I mean, you have to be tested and all sorts of things that happen. Right? Now, we can classify disability, people who get disability support, by whether you're married or single. Turns out to be really important, very interesting. This is what happens to the disability of single men by age. See, the age is along the bottom. And I've just counted the number of people who flow in to disability payments. So what you see here is that if you're a single man, the disability inflow doesn't vary much by age. Disability for single men is not something which grows as you get older in terms of getting into disability. It doesn't matter how old you are, they're basically coming at the same rate. So the young people, 25 to 29, are coming in more or less the same rate as the 55 to 59s. Now the two lines are 97, 98 and 2005, 2006. So we've had a lot of reform in this period. And the thing that's most noticeable is for single men who are disabled, it hasn't really affected the inflow. See how the lines are the same? Now, this is a sort of fun. Everybody who's married and disabled, I'm now going to apologise to you, but this is a fun picture. Look at this. Look at this. If you are married, then two things happen to you, which is sort of interesting. If you're young, you're not disabled, but as you get older, I don't know what the wife's doing to you, but the disability rates go up. Do you see how fast they go up? If you look at married men, at say 50 to 54, compare them to 60 to 64, the inflow rates are almost double. So there's something about being married that protects you from disability when you're young. Now you can imagine what that is. It's hard to get married when you're young. But the marriage thing doesn't last. I mean, as you get older, the inflow goes up. And it's the old guys. But you know what's sort of more interesting? See, I've got two lines. I've got 97, 98 and 2005, 2006. So I went home and I said, why have the wives changed? All right? Because 10 years have gone by, and now if you're an older guy with a wife, you're less likely to go on. You've got to think about that, blame them, right? Because something's happened. It can't be about men, because single men, nothing happened to single men, so it can't be about us. It must be the wives. Now, it turns out that something did happen to the wives. And I've told you what happened to the wives. What happened to the wives was they can't go down and get money anymore because I'm disabled. They have to get money in their own right. Now, suppose, and I emphasise suppose that my wife had never worked. Ever. And suppose I was 58 and I had an accident at work. And I could keep working, but my accident is not pleasant, you know. So I say, well, if I give up work and if I can get a disability payment, I'm going to get 2 payments. Nowadays, I can only get 1 unless my wife goes down. And suppose my wife says, because she's never worked, she's not prepared to do that. You know, she's frightened. As a lot of people are. They've never been there. She's frightened. So I say, oh, hang on. Right? Because we can't get by on 1 payment. We can get by on 2. Now, I don't know if this is true. I'm just making this story up. But this story would explain why there's been a drop. So that's one point I want to make. And that point is that it may well be that by aiming at this sort of person, namely the married women, you're having an impact on the married men even though you're not aiming at them. And the second thing about this picture, which I think is more interesting, is it implies a degree of choice on the part of the men. Right? Now what men? Not all men, because the disability rate is still very, very high. Right? But it goes back to this margin I'm talking about. And that's because for a lot of people in Australia, married, or for some anyway, the disability is the start, amongst older groups, is the start of the retirement process. So it links in, on the one hand, to another program, right? Retirement programs. It links in also to the way in which programs are structured. Now, to conclude, the great thing about working with this data, like I've shown you, is you can see these pictures. Right? The pictures don't tell you exactly what's going on. So everything I've said about, you know, the reason for this or the reason for that, that's all made up. All I know is this picture. You can make up your own stories. But you can get to the stories. But to get to the stories, you've got to do something extra that I do. You know, you've got to either get down into looking at the people or looking more specifically at the programs, but you can do it. So, to finish very quickly, the morals are, 1, do not look at any income support program in isolation. You must think of it as a whole. 2, if you think of the system as a whole, you can't do that sensibly without thinking about the labour market. Right? You can't move people into jobs instantly. There are too many people. 3, it took you a long time, it took us a long time to get this high incidence of disability. It's going to take income support. It's going to take us a while to get back. 3, the stock of people is characterised by long durations. I think people want to work on long durations because it seems like a good thing to do. And people have been there a long. I actually don't think that. I think because people are on long durations, they're harder to move. I think the way you should go is you've got to look at the inflows. You've got to get at people early. Once, you know, if you pick people on disability pensions for 10 years and you say our object is to get them into work, that's a hard job, especially if they're 58, right? It's a hard job. Much better to try and get people before they get on. And because I'm saying you think about programs as a group, and because the route into disability is through unemployment, you're better off trying to pick off the guys who you think look like going to become long-term unemployed into disability. So move it forward. Don't move it back. Now, as a practitioner, I think people worry about the long-term group because they have lots of needs. You know, they're the needy group. And that's good. But you've got to realise that you're trying to give programs to them because they're needy, not because you're going to have a big impact. If you want to have a big impact, you've got to be right at the other end. You've got to be aiming at the people who are less needy, who have got more choice. So I'll finish at that. Thank you.